Greetings and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Kane. Because it's St. Patrick's Day, our luck is actually unnaturally high, so in this case we are at 19 luck, which is obviously a bit higher than what Kane starts out with. What's maybe a bit funny is that we had something like a National Toothache Day, or maybe like a Tooth Day, and our luck was at 50, so even higher than it is now, which doesn't really make sense because this is not a luck-related holiday, I would say, but maybe luck is connotated with St. Patrick, and because of that, it's a bit odd that our luck is actually lower than that particular daily, but nevertheless, we are in this situation. Obviously, having 19 and 50 luck isn't that big of a difference, so we're still in a very good position. You can imagine that with this much luck, nothing can really go wrong. Luck affects the game in a multitude of different ways. It affects items one-by-one basis, so if you have any items which maybe have a chance to shoot a tier, most of them are affected by luck, meaning more luck you have, the more chances you actually have of firing that special tier. But maybe on a more microscopic level, or maybe on a more granular level, luck is determined at how many chests and drops you get after clearing rooms. And I'm sure there are some other stats or maybe effects in the game which are affected by luck, but I would say maybe the biggest contributor to how well a run is going is just based on how many consumables you can get and actually use throughout the run. What's maybe a bit odd is, even though we are at 90 luck, this particular run didn't really offer that much in terms of potentials, I would say. It didn't really shine through. It was never bad at any point, because still with this amount of luck you would never imagine the run actually being bad, because like I said before, with keys and bombs and all of that, you can expect that you can pretty much find every secret room, second secret room, and even spend the money to go to the shops. I believe that shops in general are very underrated in the strength of the bring, or I would say the strength that the items in the shop will bring to the run. A lot of people wouldn't maybe notice it because it's really not that noticeable. It's nothing flashy like Brimstone or maybe Tech X or whatever, but I would say that those little items that you get in the shop, which you wouldn't be able to afford if you didn't have this much luck, do end up a very, very big difference in the end, which is probably the difference between having a good and a bad run. Maybe the prime example here is There's Options. And There's Options is an item I did talk about before, and essentially it's an item which I believe you just increases the chances of you having a good run. It won't necessarily save your bad runs, but it will make the quality of your average run better, obviously, because you have two items to choose from the treasure room instead of one. In the treasure room especially, that's important because there are so many items which are useless, and I think that's even given by the fact that how often, if you actually count how often you enter into a treasure room and you ignore the item, or maybe you think that the item is not that good, or maybe it's even an item that you don't want to pick up because maybe you have a better spacebar item, or maybe because the item is just bad. If you count those through the whole of your runs, I think you would be surprised at how high that percentage. And even by having There's Options, I still feel like the pool is so diluted just because there's so many bad items that even with two items being offered to you, it doesn't really increase the chances of finding, it does increase the chance of finding good items, but I would say the chance isn't super severely increased to the point where maybe it breaks the game. With that said, it does make for some maybe funny coincidences or maybe some funny decisions in some cases, and whenever the game gives you an ability to make a decision between maybe a few items which you might think are good or bad, like in the first case we had Contagion or Snot Goblin, or at least the passive version of the Snot Goblin, and I think that's a very interesting decision because both of those items I think are very good, but they both serve a different purpose. So Contagion is obviously good if you're gonna be clearing rooms, so it's good for AoE clears, for killing multiple enemies, while the other item, the Snot Goblin, I'll just call it Snot Goblin, is good for killing bosses and just single target enemies because you can stack snots to enemies. And in this case, having Snot Goblin would be very good for us because essentially almost every shot would be a snot shot. Or maybe that's one of the items that doesn't really scale with luck. I think that's actually one of the items that doesn't scale with luck. But if it would scale with luck, you can imagine that in this case that would be very good. But I still feel like Contagion was a bit better, because in most cases you're not really suffering through killing the bosses, but you're mostly suffering through traversing the actual floor and actually killing the enemies, and that's why I decided actually to go that route. With that said, we did also have some interesting decisions later down the road, and I think that the biggest tell of this run was that it didn't really have any good devil deals, and I think that really makes or breaks the run in most cases, just on the quality of your devil deals that you get throughout the run. The first one was Multidimensional Baby, and Multidimensional Baby is great. I never actually not pick it up because I think it's just a good item, especially if you can use it well. In this case, I decided to ignore it. Again, I'm kind of trying my Angel Room strategy. I'm trying to evolve my meta, so to say. I really feel like there's some value in going to angel rooms, but I just can't seem to make it work. In this case, none of them even spawned, and that's obviously because later on I did take a devil deal, but at the start where I think I had like a 70% chance of actually getting an angel room, that would have been such a perfect opportunity for me to get something out of it. And especially with luck, and especially with Kane, because you have the lockpick, I feel like because there are some angel room variations which have an eternal chest into them, that's probably a good idea to go there, because you can essentially keep unlocking it for free, and that way you can get either a lot of consumables or eventually you can get an item. And the golden treasure room, the chest treasure item pool is pretty decent. In most cases it's just damage. Now sadly Afterbirth Plus has added a few items which are maybe a bit subpar, like Little Baggy, but it still has some decent items which you can get out of, something like Goat Head, which is I think one of the items that I did get. You can also get IV Bag, which would be decent in this particular run, and also all the other damage items which were already there in the previous expansions. Thankfully, this run did come to a close. Like, I feel like Anvish Special Daily ends in a certain way, and there's always something gimmicky going on. In this case, we found Mega Satan's Head or Mega Blast or whatever, and it's such an item that I hate picking up, but you know you have to if you really want to have a decent run, especially now because I feel like I've maybe fallen off a bit of the leaderboards, and I'm trying back to get actually some good runs, and I just feel like whatever I do, I just can't seem to produce a good run. Even in this case, sometimes I just feel like I played the worst in the world, really badly. It still turns out well, but sometimes I feel like I'm playing really well, and for some reason it turns out bad, and that's something that's been happening to me quite often, at least lately. So I'm really trying to kind of capitalize my opportunities. Obviously, I'm still trying to make some wacky plays, or maybe some experimental plays is a better way to put it. But I think when you see Mega Blast, you shouldn't skip it because of the quality of the item, or at least for what it brings to the table. Mega Blast is such an interesting, unique concept of an item. Just the fact that it persists through multiple rooms. I would say that its value severely diminishes later on, because there are so many room variations where you need to either dodge properly, or just there are enemies which maybe rush at you, and just the ability to constantly shoot will actually impact you negatively, because maybe the flies will explode, maybe certain enemies explode into tears, and with Mega Blast you obviously don't have as much mobility to actually dodge those shots, and because of that, I would say it's quite a detrimental item in some cases. But in the case of actually getting to Boss Rush and Harsh, just clearing out the rooms, it's one of the best items that you can probably find, just because of its efficiency in clearing the rooms. There's some luck to be said there, or at least you need to be a bit lucky to actually get it working, because you need the room variations to be just right, and when you actually start using it, you hope not to run into the dead ends. In this case, we had Battery Baby, which also helped immensely, because it gave us some passive charges when we were clearing the rooms, but it also increased our chances of finding some battery charges on the ground, which we could pick up. I think maybe the biggest contribution, not the contribution, but the biggest detriment of having Mega Blast is that the battery charges don't really work well with it. The fact that every battery charge only gives you 3 charges in total of the item is somewhat of a bummer. I really feel like it should be at least 4, because then 3 battery charges would fill it up to the end, and it just makes more sense to me. That's something I guess that can be fixed with mods and things like that, but at this point what really can be fixed with mods. But I still feel like some of these decisions are made by the design decisions are made a bit haphazardly, not really tested as to what turns best. But I really feel like battery charges, only giving it 3 charges, makes Mega Satan's Head quite unusable. Not unusable, but you have that feeling that the item is really epic, really good, but it turns out in most cases it doesn't really do anything. It maybe clears 3 rooms per floor, and that's about it. So when you actually compare it to other items that you have, it's about the same efficiency as the Necronomicon in some cases, which is obviously really sad, because Necronomicon is one of the worst items which you can probably find in the whole game. Thankfully, this run actually did get a bit wild towards the end. I really felt at this point the run just wasn't crazy enough. I picked up Bob's Brain on accident, but I didn't really regret it, because it didn't even hit me once in this particular run. So maybe that's a good indication that I'm actually playing well, even though I feel like I'm playing badly. But I did use 2 of my Yera runes to duplicate the chest here to actually get some nice items, and thankfully we did get Dr. Fetus with Sad Bombs, and also Mega Bombs. I believe they're called Mega Bombs, essentially they increase our damage, and we also got Euthanasia. And Euthanasia is great, especially with Sad Bombs and Dr. Fetus, because essentially every time we shoot out, and because of our high luck, every tier is a Euthanasia shot, and when they hit enemies, they split into more Euthanasia shots, and because every single boss produces like 10 Euthanasia shots, you can obviously expect this to be quite a deadly combo. In this case, if you actually aim it well, I think you can one-shot every stage of Mega Satan, but it does depend. You need to aim it quite well. It's not maybe as broken as it sounds, but it's still really powerful. I really feel like sometimes when you get these bomb synergies, bomb synergies seem to be one of the most common synergies in the game, and I'm really kind of sad when you get sad bombs but you don't really have a good effect, or maybe even when you get a stat upgrading item like Euthanasia but you don't really have the luck to go along with it. In this case, luck was mostly wasted just because we didn't really get any good items to scale with it. At the end, like I said, we did get Euthanasia, which is obviously very good with luck, but besides that, this was basically the only item that synergizes with it. I really feel like on these special dailies, I know that they're not seeded. I mean, they have a seed, but they're not predetermined, so not every special daily is gonna have the same run going on, which means that every year we're gonna have essentially a St. Patrick's Day daily, which is just gonna result in high luck, but the items that you actually get are not gonna be the same. And I think to some extent that's obviously great, because obviously the whole game, Isaac, is the fact that it's random and that you always have a different run. But still, I feel like when you have the special dailies only one times a year, when you have a lot of luck, it really feels like there should be some way to actually get advantage of that and actually have a really fun run going on. Sadly, that didn't really happen with this one, but I still feel like it was a decent run. It was a fun run at least, and overall, I just really enjoy every run which can actually devolve into just you being strong enough to actually make it through. Maybe the run is a bit challenging, it didn't give you enough hearts to maybe go along with it, so it really does involve a lot of dodging and good play, but at the same time, you really need to know your limits and use the items that you get to the fullest potential, and I think in this case, we did what we could. Obviously, we could have played a bit better, we could have gotten hit a bit less. Overall, our health situation was probably really bad throughout the whole run, and our dash penalty was high. I think I already said that. Our end score was 62nd, which is pretty good. I have to say so myself. Being at the top 50 is something that I've been striving for the longest time. Again, I do feel like I repeat myself sometimes, but I'm really glad that I'm actually back in that state of actually playing well, even though I felt like I played really badly. Our nationality was quite high, but I think there will be quite some variance, especially because of that there's options, and on average, there's options is obviously going to produce a better run, but some people might have not actually had the money to pick it up, or maybe they didn't go to the shop, or maybe they didn't reroll certain items, and because of that, there were different things going on, and I believe someone found Euthanasia in Boss Rush. So obviously, if you find Euthanasia in Boss Rush, that's going to help out your run much more than it did in my case, because I didn't really find anything good in Boss Rush. So I think that just maybe due to which devil deals you take and which you don't, which is a bit odd because you never really can expect which items that you take are gonna affect how well your run goes on, and there's really no tell to judge if it's a good idea or not, but that's just how Isaac works. There are some unpredictable elements in every daily, and in this case, I am interested in actually how different runs actually different people had. I'll check out some videos, but if you had your experiences, or if you had a really fun run, which I maybe missed because I didn't take a certain devil deal or whatever, please let me know, because I just want to know what's going on, and maybe I'll replay the game. I can't replay the seed because it's a special daily. Oh, never mind. I guess I'll just enjoy hearing your stories then. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.